Hello, everyone, and welcome to the English Playbook. My name is David.
And I'm Sarah, and wow, do we have an incredible episode for you today.
We really do. Today, we're tackling one of the most important topics of our time, and it's something that affects every single one of us on this planet.
That's right. We're talking about carbon footprint and sustainable living. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Oh, great, another lecture about saving the planet.
But trust me, this is so much more than that. Exactly. This episode is designed for our advanced English learners out there. We're going to be speaking at a natural pace, using real vocabulary and phrases that native speakers actually use when discussing environmental issues.
And here's the thing, whether you're passionate about the environment or not, these are conversations happening everywhere. In offices, at dinner parties, in the news, on social media. If you want to participate in meaningful discussions in English, you need this vocabulary.
So true. And we're changing up our format a bit today. Instead of just going through vocabulary lists, we're going to have a real conversation about these topics, break down the language as we go, and give you practical tips, not just for learning English, but for living more sustainably too.
It's a 2-for-1 deal. You'll improve your English and maybe pick up some habits that'll help save the planet. Not bad for 100 minutes of your time, right?
Not bad at all. Now, before we dive in, let me set the scene. Sarah and I are sitting here in our studio, and ironically, we've got our coffee in disposable cups.
Oh my gosh, David. Way to call us out right at the beginning.
Hey, we're human, and that's actually a perfect example of what we're going to talk about today. It's not about being perfect. It's about being aware and making better choices when we can.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this topic so relatable. We're all trying to do better, right? So let's learn how to talk about it in English while we're at it.
Perfect. So grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's jump into today's topic, carbon footprint and green living.
All right, David, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a carbon footprint?
Great question, and this is actually a really useful phrase to understand. Let's break it down word by word. A footprint is literally the mark your foot leaves behind when you walk on sand or snow, right?
Right, like evidence that you were there.
Exactly. So a carbon footprint is the mark or impact you leave on the environment through your actions. Specifically, it's the total amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that you produce through your daily activities.
And when we say carbon, we're talking about the element carbon, which is released into the atmosphere mainly as carbon dioxide, or CO2. This is what comes out of car exhausts, factory smokestacks, and even when we use electricity in our homes.
Right. So when someone says, I'm trying to reduce my carbon footprint, what they mean is, I'm trying to do less damage to the environment by producing fewer greenhouse gases.
And this is such a common phrase now. You hear it everywhere. People talk about having a high carbon footprint, which is bad, or a low carbon footprint, which is good.
Exactly. Now, here's an interesting language point for our listeners. We often use footprint metaphorically in English. You might hear about a company's environmental footprint or even a digital footprint, which is the trail of data you leave behind when you use the internet.
Oh, that's a great point. So the concept of a footprint as evidence of your impact is really useful across different contexts.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about what actually creates a carbon footprint. It's not just one thing. It's basically everything we do in modern life.
Right. Transportation is a huge one. Every time you drive a car, take a bus, or fly in an airplane, you're burning fuel and releasing CO2 into the atmosphere.
And here's a phrase you'll hear a lot, carbon emissions. Emissions are things that are sent out or released, so carbon emissions are the carbon gases that are released into the air.
Good point. So you might hear someone say, we need to reduce carbon emissions from vehicles. That means we need to find ways to release less carbon when we drive.
Another major source is energy use in our homes and buildings. When you turn on a light, charge your phone, or run your air conditioning, that electricity often comes from power plants that burn fossil fuels.
Fossil fuels, that's another key term. These are energy sources like coal, oil, and natural gas that formed from ancient plants and animals over millions of years.
And when we burn these fossil fuels, we release carbon that's been stored underground for millions of years back into the atmosphere. That's a big part of why we have climate change.
Speaking of which, let's clarify some terms that people often confuse. Global warming, climate change, and greenhouse effect. David, what's the difference?
Great question. The greenhouse effect is actually a natural process. Certain gases in our atmosphere trap heat from the sun, kind of like a greenhouse traps heat for plants.
So the greenhouse effect itself isn't bad.
Correct. The problem is the enhanced greenhouse effect. We're producing too many greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, and others, and they're trapping too much heat.
Which leads to global warming, which is the increase in Earth's average temperature.
Exactly. And climate change is the broader term that includes not just rising temperatures, but all the changes to weather patterns, sea levels, ecosystems, and more.
So global warming is a part of climate change, but climate change includes much more than just temperature increases.
Precisely. You might hear people debate whether global warming or climate change is the right term to use. Scientists prefer climate change because it's more accurate. Some places might actually get colder, but the overall system is becoming more unstable.
Now, David, here's where things get interesting from a language perspective. There's still debate about climate change, and you'll hear very different ways people talk about it.
Absolutely, and this is where our advanced learners can really pick up on nuanced language. Let's look at how different people frame this discussion.
So you might hear someone say, "What's your take on all this global warming hysteria in the media?"
Ooh, good example. Let's break that down. What's your take on? That's a really common conversational phrase meaning, what's your opinion about, or how do you interpret?
Right, and notice the word hysteria. That's a loaded word, isn't it?
Very much so. Hysteria means excessive or uncontrollable emotion, panic, or excitement. By calling it global warming hysteria, the speaker is suggesting that people are overreacting or panicking unnecessarily.
So immediately you know this person is skeptical about climate change just from their word choice.
Exactly. Word choice reveals attitude. Now, compare that to someone who says, there have been tons of scientific studies and the scientific community says the Earth is heating up.
Very different tone. This person is citing evidence and authority, scientific studies, and the scientific community.
And they use the phrase heating up, which is more neutral than hysteria. They're presenting it as a fact-based concern rather than an emotional panic.
Here's another phrase that came up. It sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo.
Oh, mumbo jumbo. This is such a useful phrase. Mumbo jumbo means nonsense, gibberish, or something that sounds complicated but doesn't really mean anything.
Right. So if I start explaining quantum physics to you and you don't understand, you might say, "That all sounds like mumbo jumbo to me."
Exactly. It's a way of dismissing something as meaningless or incomprehensible. So when someone says climate change is mumbo jumbo, they're saying they don't believe it's real or meaningful.
Now, here's an interesting phrase. The Earth will save itself. It survived worse disasters in the past.
This is actually a valid scientific point, but it misses the human element. Yes, Earth has gone through major changes. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions. The planet survived.
But here's the thing. We're not worried about the planet itself. We're worried about whether humans and current ecosystems can survive the rapid changes we're causing.
Exactly. When someone says the Earth will save itself, they're technically right, but they're missing the point. It's not about saving the planet, it's about saving ourselves and the world as we know it.
Great point. Now, let's look at another phrase that came up. We live in the boonies.
Oh, I love this expression. The boonies, also called the boondocks, means a remote, rural area far from cities and civilization.
So if I live way out in the countryside, hours from the nearest city, I might say I live in the boonies.
Right, and you'll hear variations of this. You might say someone lives in the middle of nowhere, or out in the sticks, or in the backwoods, or even where the wind turns around.
Where the wind turns around. I haven't heard that one.
It's more regional, but it's a funny way of saying somewhere is so remote that even the wind gives up and turns back.
I love it. So in the context of our environmental discussion, the person says, we live in the boonies. There's no way anyone here is ever going to walk or bike to work.
Right. They're making the argument that environmental solutions designed for cities don't work in rural areas. It's harder to use public transportation, solar panels might not be feasible, and so on.
Which brings up an important point about these conversations. One size doesn't fit all. What works in a city might not work in the country, and vice versa.
Absolutely. And that's why these discussions can get heated. People have different circumstances, different access to resources, different priorities.
Now let's talk about one of the biggest buzzwords in environmental discussions, sustainability.
Yes, sustainability is everywhere now. You hear about sustainable development, sustainable tourism, sustainable agriculture, sustainable fashion.
So what does it actually mean? Let's break down the word. It comes from the verb to sustain, which means to maintain, support, or keep going over time.
Exactly. So sustainability is about practices and habits that we can maintain indefinitely without depleting resources or causing irreversible damage.
Right. The opposite would be unsustainable practices, things we can do now but can't keep doing forever because we'll run out of resources or cause too much damage.
Perfect example. If you chop down trees faster than they can grow back, that's unsustainable forestry. If you fish faster than fish populations can reproduce, that's unsustainable fishing.
So, when we talk about sustainable living, we mean organizing our lives in ways that don't deplete the Earth's resources or destroy the environment for future generations.
And here's where we get into another popular phrase, going green.
Ah, yes, go green or be green or living green. This is such a common expression now.
Right, green has become synonymous with environmentally friendly. It comes from the color of plants in nature, so green practices are those that work with nature rather than against it.
You'll see this everywhere: green energy, green products, green buildings, green transportation. Even companies that want to appear environmentally responsible will talk about their green initiatives.
Although we should mention greenwashing.
Oh, good point. Greenwashing is when companies pretend to be environmentally friendly for marketing purposes, but aren't actually doing much to help the environment.
It's like whitewashing, but with environmental claims. The company puts on a green exterior to wash away concerns about their actual practices.
Exactly. So, as consumers and as English learners, it's good to be skeptical when you see too many green claims without specifics.
Now let's talk about energy efficiency. This is another phrase you'll hear constantly.
Energy efficiency means getting the same results while using less energy. An energy efficient light bulb gives you the same amount of light but uses less electricity.
Right, and you'll hear about energy efficient appliances, energy efficient buildings, energy efficient vehicles. The idea is to reduce waste and use energy more intelligently.
Here's a useful phrase pattern. It would take a lot of money to get my house retrofitted to be green and energy efficient.
Great example. Let's break that down. Retrofitted or refitted means to upgrade or modify something that already exists with new parts or features.
So if you retrofit your house, you're adding new technology or making changes to an old building to improve it.
Exactly. You might retrofit a house with solar panels, better insulation, new windows, or energy-efficient heating systems.
And this is often expensive, which is why some people resist making these changes, even if they'd eventually save money.
Which brings us to another key phrase, upfront costs versus long-term savings.
Yes, upfront means at the beginning, before you start seeing benefits. So solar panels have high upfront costs. They're expensive to buy and install.
But over time, they save you money on electricity bills, so you have long-term savings. The question is, can you afford the upfront investment to get those long-term benefits?
And that's a real barrier for many people. Not everyone has thousands of dollars to spend on solar panels, even if they'd eventually save money. All right, let's get into specific solutions. Transportation is one of the biggest contributors to carbon footprint, so let's start there.
Good choice. Now, the first thing people usually think of is hybrid vehicles.
Right, so let's explain what hybrid means because it's used in lots of contexts. A hybrid is a combination of two different things.
Exactly. In biology, a hybrid might be a cross between two different species. In cars, a hybrid vehicle combines two types of engines, a traditional gasoline engine and an electric motor.
The most famous example is probably the Toyota Prius, which was one of the first commercially successful hybrid cars.
Right, and the way these work is really clever. At low speeds, like in city traffic, the car runs on the electric motor, which produces zero emissions and is very quiet.
Then, when you get on the highway and need more power, it switches to the gasoline engine, which is more efficient at higher speeds.
And some hybrids can even recharge their battery while you drive through something called regenerative braking.
Ooh, that's a good vocabulary word. Regenerative means self-renewing or self-restoring. So regenerative braking captures energy that would normally be wasted when you brake and uses it to recharge the battery.
Brilliant! Now, beyond hybrids, we're seeing fully electric vehicles becoming more popular,
Yes, EVs, that's EV for electric vehicle, run entirely on battery power with no gasoline engine at all.
which means zero emissions from the vehicle itself, although we should mention that the electricity to charge them has to come from somewhere.
Good point. If the electricity comes from a coal-fired power plant, you're still indirectly creating emissions.
Exactly. That's why we need to think about the whole system, not just individual parts. The phrase for this is life cycle analysis or cradle to grave analysis.
Which means looking at the environmental impact of something from when it's made through its use to when it's disposed of.
Now, not everyone can afford a new hybrid or electric car. So, what are other transportation options?
Well, there's carpooling. Let's talk about that phrase. Carpooling, or to carpool, means sharing a car ride with other people who are going to the same place.
Right, so instead of four people driving four separate cars to work, they all ride together in one car. This cuts emissions by 75%.
And you'll hear people say, I carpool with some buddies of mine, or I'm in a carpool with 3 coworkers.
Another option is public transportation. Buses, trains, subways, light rail.
Although, as we mentioned earlier, this isn't always available if you live in the boonies.
True. But if you do have access to public transit, it's much more efficient than everyone driving separately.
Then there are the most environmentally friendly options of all, walking and biking.
Yes, zero emissions, good for your health, and often faster than driving in congested cities.
Although, again, this depends on infrastructure. Cities need safe bike lanes, pedestrian-friendly streets, and reasonable distances between home and work.
Absolutely. This is where urban planning and environmental goals intersect. Cities designed for cars make it hard to go car-free.
Let's move from transportation to the home. David, what are some ways people can reduce their carbon footprint at home?
Great question. Let's start with everyone's favorite, solar panels.
Ah, yes, solar panels. So solar comes from the Latin word for sun. Anything solar relates to the sun.
Right. We have solar energy, solar power, solar system, and a panel is a flat surface or board, often used to collect or display something.
So a solar panel is a flat device that collects energy from the sun and converts it into electricity.
Exactly. These are usually installed on rooftops where they can get maximum sun exposure throughout the day.
And they're becoming more and more common, especially in sunny places like California, Arizona, Spain, Australia.
The great thing about solar panels is that once they're installed, the energy is basically free. The sun isn't going to send you a bill.
Right, although there are those upfront costs we talked about earlier.
True. Solar panel systems can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 or more, depending on the size of your home.
But many places offer tax incentives or rebates to help with those costs, and you can sell excess electricity back to the grid in some areas.
Good point. Now, another water-related solution that came up was rain barrels.
Yes, a barrel is a large cylindrical container. Rain barrels collect rainwater from your roof through the gutters.
And what do you do with that water?
Well, you can't drink it without treatment, but it's perfect for watering your garden, washing your car, or other outdoor uses.
This is especially valuable in areas that experience droughts or where water is expensive or scarce.
Absolutely, and it's such a simple solution. You're literally using water that would otherwise just run off into the storm drains.
Now let's talk about something that might sound less exciting but is actually really important: insulation.
Insulation. This is material used to prevent heat transfer. It keeps your house warm in winter and cool in summer.
Right. Good insulation in your walls, attic, and floors means you use less energy for heating and cooling, which is one of the biggest home energy uses.
You might hear about weatherizing your home or sealing air leaks.
Yes, weatherizing means making your home more resistant to weather conditions, mainly by improving insulation and sealing gaps where air can leak in or out.
Simple things like caulking windows, adding weather stripping to doors, and insulating your attic can make a huge difference.
And unlike solar panels, these improvements are relatively inexpensive.
Now, let's talk about appliances and electronics. What should people know?
Well, first, look for Energy Star ratings. In the US, Energy Star is a government program that certifies energy-efficient products.
Similar programs exist in other countries. The EU has energy labels, Australia has star ratings, and so on.
The key is to look for appliances that do the same job while using less electricity. Energy-efficient refrigerators, washing machines, dishwashers, and air conditioners can cut your energy use significantly.
And here's a simple tip. Unplug devices when you're not using them.
Yes, this is called phantom power or vampire power. Even when devices are turned off, they often still draw a small amount of electricity.
Things like phone chargers, laptop chargers, TVs, game consoles, they're all slowly draining power even when not in use.
Using power strips makes this easier. You can turn off multiple devices with one switch.
Another easy win is switching to LED light bulbs.
LED stands for light-emitting diode. These bulbs use about 75% less energy than traditional incandescent bulbs and last much longer.
And they used to be expensive, but now they're very affordable. There's really no reason not to make the switch. Okay, David, let's talk about something that surprises a lot of people, the environmental impact of food.
Yes, this is huge and often overlooked. The food system accounts for about 25 to 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
That much? Why is food such a big contributor?
Well, there are several factors. First, there's agriculture itself, growing crops and raising animals. Then processing, packaging, transportation, refrigeration, and finally waste.
So it's the whole life cycle we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Let's start with meat production, particularly beef.
Right, beef has a particularly large carbon footprint. Why is that?
Several reasons. First, cows produce methane, which is a greenhouse gas much more potent than CO2.
Wait, cows produce methane? How?
Well, to put it delicately, it comes from their digestive process. They burp and, release methane as they digest grass.
Okay, so cow farts are contributing to climate change?
Cow burps mainly, but yes, it sounds funny, but it's actually a serious issue. Methane traps about 25 times more heat than CO2.
Wow, what else makes beef production problematic?
Well, cattle need a lot of land for grazing, and forests are often cleared to create pastures. This is called deforestation.
And trees absorb CO2, so cutting them down means less CO2 is being removed from the atmosphere.
Exactly. Plus, growing the grain to feed cattle, because most cattle are grain-fed, not grass-fed, requires even more land, water, and energy.
So the environmental cost of beef is really high. Does this mean we all need to become vegetarians?
Not necessarily, but eating less meat, especially less beef, can make a big difference. Some people follow meatless Mondays or reduce portions.
Or you could shift to chicken, pork, or fish, which have smaller environmental footprints than beef.
Right. And plant-based proteins like beans, lentils, and tofu have even smaller footprints.
Now, another food issue is food miles. Can you explain that concept?
Sure, food miles refers to the distance food travels from where it's grown to where it's eaten.
So if I'm eating strawberries in winter that were flown in from South America, those strawberries have high food miles.
Exactly. And transportation requires fuel, which creates emissions. This is why eating local or eating seasonal has become popular.
Right. Local food means food grown nearby, and seasonal eating means eating foods that naturally grow in your area during that time of year.
You'll see farmers markets promoting local food and restaurants advertising farm-to-table dining.
Farm to table, that's a trendy phrase now. It means the food comes directly from local farms to your plate with minimal processing and transportation.
Exactly. Now let's talk about organic food. This is another term people often associate with environmental sustainability.
Right. Organic food is grown without synthetic pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers.
The theory is that organic farming is better for the soil, doesn't pollute waterways with chemicals, and is safer for farm workers.
Although organic food is often more expensive, which makes it less accessible to many people.
True, and there's debate about whether organic is always better for the environment. It depends on many factors.
The key point is to think about where your food comes from, how it's produced, and how much of it you waste.
Speaking of waste, that's another huge issue. About 1/3 of all food produced globally is wasted.
That's shocking. And when food goes to landfills, it produces methane as it decomposes.
Right, so reducing food waste is crucial. Simple things like meal planning, proper storage, and eating leftovers make a big difference.
And composting, which we'll talk about more in a minute.
All right, Sarah, let's tackle waste and recycling, another area where individuals can make a real impact.
Yes, and this ties into what's probably the most famous environmental slogan: reduce, reuse, recycle.
The 3 Rs. Let's break each one down. First, reduce. What does this mean?
Reduce means use less, buy less, waste less. It's about minimizing consumption in the first place.
Exactly. Before you buy something, ask, do I really need this? Can I borrow it instead? Will I still use it in a year?
This combats our disposable culture, the tendency to buy cheap things, use them briefly, and throw them away.
Right. Instead of buying bottled water, get a reusable water bottle. Instead of disposable coffee cups, bring a travel mug.
Which brings us to reuse, the second R.
Reuse means using something multiple times rather than throwing it away after one use.
Perfect examples are reusable shopping bags instead of plastic bags, cloth napkins instead of paper napkins, rechargeable batteries instead of disposable ones.
And here's a useful phrase: single-use plastics. These are plastic items designed to be used once and thrown away.
Like plastic straws, plastic cutlery, plastic bags. These are major environmental problems because they don't biodegrade.
Biodegrade, good vocabulary word. This means to break down naturally through biological processes.
Right. Organic materials like food scraps and paper biodegrade relatively quickly. Plastic can take hundreds or thousands of years.
Although now we're seeing biodegradable plastics made from corn or other plant materials.
Yes, these are designed to break down faster, though they still need the right conditions to biodegrade properly.
Now the third R, recycle.
Recycle means processing used materials to make new products.
The most commonly recycled materials are paper, cardboard, glass, aluminum, and certain plastics.
And recycling is great, but here's an important point. It should be the last resort after you've reduced and reused as much as possible.
Exactly. Recycling still requires energy and resources. It's better than throwing things away, but not as good as not creating waste in the first place.
Now, let's talk about composting. This is one of the best ways to deal with organic waste.
Right. A compost bin or compost pile is where you put food scraps, yard waste, and other organic materials to decompose naturally.
As these materials break down, they turn into compost, a rich soil-like material that's great for gardens.
So instead of sending your banana peels, coffee grounds, and vegetable scraps to a landfill where they'd produce methane, you turn them into nutrient-rich soil.
It's like magic. Trash becomes treasure.
Exactly. And you can compost things like fruit and...
Wow, David, we've covered so much ground today. Let's wrap up with some final thoughts.
Great idea. So what's the main message we want listeners to take away?
I think it's that perfection isn't the goal, progress is. You don't have to do everything right, just start making better choices where you can.
Absolutely. Small changes add up. If millions of people make small changes, the cumulative effect is enormous. And from a language learning perspective, these environmental topics give you incredible vocabulary for real-world conversations.
Right. Whether you're discussing current events, debating policy, or just chatting with friends, these phrases and concepts will come up.
So let's do a quick recap of key vocabulary we covered today. Carbon footprint, sustainability, go green, hybrid vehicles, solar panels, biodegradable, compost, the 3 Rs.
Energy efficiency, food miles, local food, organic, recycling, renewable energy, fossil fuels, climate change.
And don't forget those colorful phrases: mumbo jumbo, living in the boonies, upfront costs, life cycle analysis.
These are all phrases you'll encounter in newspapers, podcasts, documentaries, and everyday conversation.
Exactly. So keep practicing, keep learning, and remember, every conversation is an opportunity to improve your English.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the English Playbook. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends.
And leave us a comment. What are you doing to reduce your carbon footprint? What environmental topics would you like us to cover next?
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep being awesome.
See you in the next episode.